the more and more the population of the world grows, living in these large mecca of populations in cities and things like that. We're all working these typically 9-to-5 jobs, which are typically quite stressful. One of my first teachers would say to me, if you can breathe, you can practice yoga. So we're all able to breathe, we're all alive, right? So the more and more we can kind of harness the use and be mindful of our breath, we're essentially able then to bring our mind to this state of calm.
A yogic lifestyle encourages a conscious shift towards our approach in life and towards the world around us. The intent is to move towards a place of spiritual connection, unity, and inner truth. But how can you do that given that we live in such a stressful and demanding day to day? I'm your host Anushka, and in this episode, we'll talk about practices and techniques to lead a yogic lifestyle. And we have with us Davin. Welcome to the show, Davin.
Thank you very much, Anushka. Thank you for having me on the show. I look forward to sharing with you some of my insights and my experience of yoga with the platform.
I was really excited to do this episode because it's a very unique topic, apart from the other career or, study abroad topics that we have done before. This is absolutely a completely different kind of realm that we were going into. So the very first question I just want to ask you is why should somebody even consider leading a yogic lifestyle? Why would somebody put in their time and effort to understand what goes into it and then put in the effort to continue to have that kind of lifestyle?
Yeah, very good question, a very relevant question in regards to modern day society. We've seen how yoga has been more and more popularized over the last 30 years, and even so much more now in the last kind of 10, 15 years to which I've been doing it. And we're seeing the more and more the population of the world grows, living in these kind of large mecca of populations in cities and things like that. We're all working these typically 9-to-5 jobs, which are typically quite stressful. Not so much on the physical aspect in lots of ways, it's more so on the mental capacities as well. So practices like meditation, being mindful throughout your day, or even trying to upkeep some form of mindfulness and well-being, taking care of yourself, I feel is really, really important, just due to the general stresses of modern day society. And that goes not just, of course, here in the West, of course, out in India as well. India's becoming more and more commercialized and corporatized in the world of economics and finances as well. So that's even more so important there.
You briefly touched upon meditation and these kind of techniques. What would the techniques be if somebody wants to maybe start with it, or just wants to know a bit more of what are the exact practices and techniques they can employ to at least start with?
Yeah, very good question. And we can tend to sometimes, we all have that typical stereotype of what we think yoga is, and you see these social media accounts with people doing crazy postures and movements, and we think, well, I can't do yoga, look at that person, I can never do that. But yoga's a lot more than it just being the physical postures, and essentially speaking, one of my first teachers would say to me, if you can breathe, you can practice yoga. So we're all able to breathe, we're all alive, right? So the more and more we can kind of harness the use and be mindful of our breath, the we're essentially able then to bring our mind to this state of calm just by focusing on simple inhales and exhales. This could be really a simple practice like equaling your inhale with your exhale. So you could inhale for 3, exhale for 3. Perhaps a lot of the listening audience might have heard of a pranayama called Anuloma Viloma. I've heard, just having recently returned from India and now back in my home country of the UK, a lot of the Indians that I've met, they've actually done Anuloma Viloma in school, they were saying to me. So the pranayama is quite a popularized practice in India. So Anuloma Viloma literally means alternative nostril breathing. So you just simply, with the right hand, you just close off the right nostril, inhale in through the left, close the left, open the right, exhale through the right, inhale through the right, and exhale through the left. And you just continue that cycle really until however long that might take you to feel that sense of calm. Of course, do that with the eyes closed, find a relatively comfortable, quiet place to do it. And it really does have quite a profound effect on your nervous system and generally your stress levels. So in regards to some of the most simplest of breath techniques, I would recommend either, just like I say, the equal inhale with the exhale or analoma viloma.
So I think these are the techniques which are very, just for any starter, if somebody wants to get into understanding what they can do. But for people who are leading a 9 to 5, life, for example, they have a fixed schedule, but then at the same time, they don't feel that they have a routine. What would your advice be for them who have kind of a very strict schedule, but at the same time they feel very lost mentally because
Mm.
there's a lot of monotony, or maybe they feel that they don't have a lot of freedom when it comes to making choices in their life. So what would you say, or what would your advice be when it comes to how can these practices be incorporated to give the sense of balance to them?
It's a very good question because, you know, the more that we discover our own health and how important that is for us in regards to being able to move through our life pain free and to be healthy, we really have to kind of take our questioning back into how important is our health to us. So, we all have that expectancy of needing to go out to work, to earn a living, to pay for our rent, to take care of our family, to take care of ourselves. And so within that expectation, and we really need to find the right questions there and how important it is to take care of ourselves first. So even in amongst a 9 to 5 job, I would recommend to, even if it's just a 5 to 10 minutes per day, is just trying to find part of your schedule per day where you can fit in just that small amount of time just to do something that's for you. It doesn't necessarily even have to be like a yoga practice on a yoga mat. You could just simply be going out and just taking a walk in nature, or just having a bit of time and space with you, doing something that you really find resonates with your own kind of passions and your own interests, just so you're able to center yourself. Because then that is essentially, as the essence of yoga, is making sure that you take care of yourself first before you're able to give to others. So just like I say, yeah, just referring back to, I'd really try to highlight a part of the day there where you can really spend a minimum of 5 minutes just for yourself, whether that's before you go to work, after you go to work. Even if you do have like a family and trying to find time in and around that, you have to really try to sculpt out the time where you can find that precious time for yourself, which of course some of you out there might be hearing it's not an easy thing to do, but then you've really got to ask yourself the question, how important is your own health? And so I feel that as long as you're able to answer that with a positive affirmation, then it's important that we do spend that time for ourselves.
I think that's very powerful because while you were answering the question, a question that was popping up in my head was that is there a right time to do it? Is morning the right time to do it, or is at the end of the day the right time to do it? But then you mentioned that it can be any time. You just need to take out those 5 to 10 minutes for yourself and answer the questions that is your health the priority for you, other than all the other things that are happening. Um, the next question I have is it's a little personal as well because I have that experience in my own life that if you are leading a highly stressful lifestyle, for example, if you're a caregiver to somebody, or if for some people, it's demand or kind of the expectations that your employer has, it's kind of overwhelming, or maybe
Mm.
it comes in phases where things become very overwhelming, but then at other times you're able to handle it. For people who have a really stressful lifestyle and they're not able to keep themselves first, or that kind of question pops up in their head, what were your advice to to be for them?
So yes, a really, really tough question, because if you think of a lot of the societies in the world, and especially culture, we're kind of, especially here in the UK where I'm from, we're kind of brought up to like make sure people are happy before we are. So it's the famous term known as the people pleaser. So we're often, even if we might not feel 100% ourselves or not necessarily feel that balance ourselves, we'll still kind of go out of our own way to make sure someone else is happy, even if that kind of can affect our own health and our own mental stability, essentially. So I feel, especially in regards to referring this to like contexts of yoga, it's really important that we kind of try to answer these questions, to distinguish what our own priorities are and what our own purpose is here. Because the yoga practice says again and again, if we're not able to honor our own authentic selves first, then essentially speaking, that leads to suffering further down the road for the individual. So we really have to kind of get our, what we would say in the UK more so, is get our ducks in a row to make sure that we have our priorities in the right order. Because essentially speaking, the more that we do for others rather than respecting ourselves first, a lot of the texts, the yogic texts as well, will say that down the road you're kind of then you're given back that karma in so many ways, to which in so many ways it kind of leads on to misery and suffering. So we really have to kind of answer the question there, like, okay, do I value my own health over everyone else? Which can be a little bit of an awkward question to answer, because we've kind of been brought up into this society where we kind of, we want to be able to fit into a community. We want to be able to fit into society, and where do we fit in this place, or in this community? And in lots of ways, sometimes we might go out of our own way to kind of impress, or to make sure that we're able to fit in, even if that doesn't really resonate with what our authentic truths are. So it's quite a challenging question to ask. And I mean, even my own experience recently of teaching out in India and hosting teacher trainings, we were teaching quite a lot, and it was quite an interesting one, really, because even then I realized that I was perhaps doing too much, and I wasn't having the time and the attention to be able to focus on myself. So eventually, like, it was like I was on the borderline there with not truly respecting my own limitations, really, as a teacher. And in the end, I started to then pick up a bit of a cold, and a bit of I was feeling overwhelmed, not getting enough sleep, so all these other kind of counterintuitive things started to happen to my health. And that was really truly because I wasn't really respecting my own practice. And then, of course, that can, in essence, start to affect your relationships and sometimes your other interactions with people out in the world, So, yeah. Does that answer the question?
I completely, yeah, absolutely. Because so as I mentioned that I do have a personal experience, and when you said that, it can be a very awkward question to ask yourself, that are you putting yourself first? It might seem that you're being very selfish, but then I think if you just rephrase it and ask that, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't really take care of the other person who you love, is more than yourself, maybe. And that's the question I asked myself, and that's when I realized that I really need to sit down and have this conversation with myself, that it's really important to be on the right path, because then only I'll not burn out, basically, and then only I'll be able to continue to take care of the other person that I love more than I love myself. And I completely understand your point, and I absolutely agree with it. And I think this was very insightful for our listeners. It was surely insightful for me. I'm sure of that, and I just hope that our listeners find it as informational and as insightful as I found it. And thank you once more for coming and doing this episode with us.
You're very welcome, Anushka. Thank you for having me on the show and on the platform. And
thank you so much for listening to this episode of TopConnect. If you have any questions related to the episode, feel free to check out the links in the description below. As promised, here's your chance to win a one-on-one call with our guest. All you need to do is talk about the top 3 learnings that you got from this episode on any of your major social media platforms, and don't forget to tag TopConnect. Also, if you're listening to this on Spotify, don't forget to check out the questions and the poll below. I'm your host Anushka, and you were listening to TopConnect, an educational podcast by TopMate, hosted and produced by me.